approach a familiar topic that I've dealt with from time to time, which is the dismantling of the family. But I wanted to talk about it from a different point of view. So today's video is about the subversion of the family. Let's talk about fathers. So not too long ago, someone had actually commented asking me if I had ever created a video approaching the idea of the dismantling of the family in the perspective of fathers, because I always do seem to focus more on mothers, because being a mother myself, that is the way that I see things. I usually talk about, compulsory schooling. It kind of ripped the family apart, a family that was once together. And then I move on to women's lib and how it took mothers out of the homes and away from their children. And so I'm going to touch on that a little bit today, but I'm going to touch on that only to complement what I'm going to be addressing regarding fathers today. Because you know what? The whole process of compulsory schooling through women's liberation, through what we have going on now, has had a huge effect on fatherhood. And it has had a very negative effect on fatherhood. And it's something that I can't believe that I didn't even think to address before. And that is my own fault. Again, I was so focused on talking about mothers all the time that I completely missed the huge importance of what happened to dads, to fathers. So yeah, let's go back to pre-compulsory schooling. Pre-compulsory schooling, pre-industrial revolution, families were typically together. Fathers might have been out of the house, maybe working on the fields or whatever it is that they do throughout the day, but it wasn't like it is today, where a dad leaves and goes to his work, at a business or somewhere else, and then he comes home after 8 hours and then they eat dinner. It was nothing like that. The family was still central at that time, and a lot of times the children themselves, especially the boys, were helping their fathers with whatever jobs that it was that they had to do. And in fact, it wasn't just the sons that were helping. The wives were helping. The girls were helping. It was a family enterprise, because a lot of these families at this point were still homesteading. And so these children had the mentoring of both mothers and fathers during this time. Unfortunately, though, once the Industrial Revolution got started, a lot of fathers were taken out of their homes and they started working, not taken like forcibly. I don't want to make it sound like that, but they made it sound appealing to them. So they started working in these factories away from their homes. And then the children themselves got taken out of their homes to be placed in these schools. And while I can't really say forcibly, it was by law. So if you want to look at it that way, maybe you could say by force. But these kids were then taken away from their families. They were placed in these schools each day. And so what happened was the dismantling of the family began there, because what was once a very central figure of the family working together to be self-sustaining, that was kind of ripped apart. And not only were these kids not learning the skills that prior generations had learned so that they could be independent, they were also losing a very important aspect of being at home, and that was having the mentorship, the guidance of both parents. And yes, kids need their fathers, and I don't think that enough importance is placed on that today. So moving on, then we have the women's liberation movement. And one thing that I want to point out to you is that Industrial Revolution, compulsory schooling, and women's lib all had the Rockefeller family behind them. And that is not by accident. This was planned, and I've mentioned in other videos that one of the whole reasons for the compulsory schooling and for women's lib was to kind of dissolve the family. They just wanted this utopian society, this idea that one day children would no longer be living with their parents, the whole Brave New World scenario. And I've talked about that in several other videos. But women's lib didn't just affect women. It didn't just affect children. It affected fathers too, because what Women's Lib did was, since compulsory schooling provided the daycare that mothers needed for their children, because at this point in time, by the time that Women's Lib started, it was normal for the mother to be home and for the father to be out working, which was different. It was a different setup than what it had been pre-compulsory schooling, but the child at least still had one parent home with them. It was usually not the father, it was usually the mother. But what Women's Lib did was it provoked women into wanting to kind of step outside of the home and to not provide that maternal role that so many children need in the home. And it also provided them a way to start looking at their husbands as disposable. A lot of these mothers, they got a sense of freedom. They got a sense of freedom from having to look after their children. And they were told that being at home was a bad thing. Being at home was akin to slavery. And a lot of women, unfortunately, believed this.